give us a combo. You're the piano man. Give us a combo tonight. I'm going to be starting a little mini-series, maybe? I don't know. Just sort of describing various things, sort of as a letter to myself in the past, where I describe a lot of things that I sort of wish I knew beforehand when it came to my fighting game journey. And if you couldn't tell by the world's worst fighting game joke, I will be talking about pianoing, but not just in terms of, oh, how it's important in terms as a mechanic, but also in terms of reducing the mental stack that a player has to manage in order to play consistently at their best. And so I'm just going to leave this first to 10 running in the background. You could find this basically anywhere. I'm just doing this as sort of background content and as extra context for what I want to be talking about. And you might be thinking, okay, where are you going with this? Well, the player in particular that I want to focus more on, or the character rather, is Sasquatch. And as far as I know, B-Bagel's probably one of, if not the best Sasquatch on Fightcade at the moment. So you're going to see a lot of visual examples of what I want to explain, because Sasquatch, good Sasquatch play in general, exemplifies what I am going for here. So what about Sasquatch am I talking about? What does he have to do with pianoing? Well, one of the primary tools at Sasquatch's disposal is his hop dash. Other than him, Felicia and Wolf / Talbane / Gallon have a hop dash in the Darkstalker series, whereas some characters might have grounded dashes, like Fish here, or they might have Morrigan-style dashes, like, Morrigan and also Jeddah, and some characters have teleport dashes, like Shenko and Dimitri. I'm going to refer to them as the animals, but hopefully not that much. Sasquatch, Felicia, and Wolf. These characters are able to use aerial attacks in their dash. Mind you, the Morrigan Dashers can also do this. However, they are immediately placed on the ground after their dash, whereas Morrigan and Jeddah are left in the air after their dash has completed, which means that they are likely more vulnerable as they come down if they whiff. So they have to play a lot more carefully, and in regards to how they maneuver. However, you'll also notice that if you ever look at a tier list that, like, Felicia and Wolf are pretty good characters, and Sasquatch is top 2, uncontested. This is borderline fact, crossing over from opinion, created over 2 decades of player experience. And one of the biggest tools that I'm sort of omitting, just so I could lead into this, is the fact that you can, for all the animals, after you dash, you can hold in the other direction to shorten not just the length of the dash, but also, you see it right there, but also increase the speed at which you traverse across the ground, increase your ground speed. So the way you would do that is you would input 6/6, and then immediately after that, you would input a 4. You would go immediately in the opposite direction while you're in the middle of your jump arc, or your dash arc rather. And what this does is show the effects on screen right now, is it slows, well, it doesn't slow you down, it makes you more fast, but it gets you on the ground earlier, and it allows you to do 2 things, at least that I know. I'm sure it probably does a lot more things, there's a lot more thought that goes into it, but on the simplest level, What it does is not only does it allow you to be ground actionable earlier, which means you can continue your pressure or continue your neutral after you shorten a dash, but it also allows you to throw out these really, really fast overheads, which in turn also means that you are playing a much scarier game in regards to your mix, which is very important in a game that is described as ironically defensive as Vampire Savior. A lot of top players in the past have said, well, Vampire Savior is a game that is more about defending oneself due to the existence of push block and how good chicken blocking in general in this game is and how good fuzzy blocking is. A character like Sasquatch sort of bypasses that by just being very fast, and it requires a lot of prediction on a good player's end to prevent themselves from being mixed up. Mind you, usually if they're hopping, you could just block overhead. However, you could empty hop, shorten the hop, and go into a low, which leads into a Magic Series combo, which leads into a knockdown, which leads into you resetting your mix again, which is the crux of good Sasquatch play. Mind you, I do not say that this is the entirety of Sasquatch's play. You have plenty of other great tools at your disposal, such as ES Ice Pillars, probably the best, or at least one of the best metered moves, due to the fact that not only are you a rushdown character, but you probably have one of the best, or at the very least one of the better zoning tools in the game to control the space and sort of walk behind it if you want to. But you also have more niche tools like your command grab, like your big kick, which also is your guard cancel in Sasquatch's case. These tools, while not as important, they come together as a whole to create the monster that is Sasquatch. And mind you, this is also ignoring some of the basic things about Sasquatch, in that despite being considered one of the bigger characters in the game, he is very, very, very fast. Think more so like a character like Wario from Smash Bros., where you don't expect such a large character to maneuver at such fast paces. But in exchange, or rather not in exchange, but in addition to being so fast, you also have the health pool of one of these larger characters. So Sasquatch is, in fact, quite bulky compared to the rest of the cast. Mind you, not as bulky as a character like, say, Victor, for instance, but mind you, only the most dedicated players are going to go for Victor. In any case, he's definitely been sort of put down over the years. Victor, that is. But Sasquatch is sort of rocking on. And in part, that is due to the fact that you can do these quick hops. And the point that I want to get across, and the point that's taking me roughly 10 minutes to get to, is that you are not, or many players at least, and definitely in my experience, you are not inputting 6, then forward. You are not thinking of it as 6-5, 6-5, 4. You are thinking of it, well, mind you, first off, nobody thinks of going to neutral as its own motion unless you are spamming electrics, which may or may not get its own little thing. But you are thinking more so, flick the stick forward, and then while you're flipping it forward, you're also sort of flipping it in the opposite direction. So, mind you, this is definitely a very stick-centric thing. And when I say stick, I do mean stick. I'm not talking about leverless controllers or pads. I am specifically talking about the arcade joystick experience, since that is what I am most familiar with, I imagine that it is wholly different and may even require a different philosophy entirely when it comes to using other types of controllers in this particular scenario. But for the sake of this example that I'm going for, I will only be focusing on stick in particular. So, okay, how do you do this? Or what's the trick here? You're just saying stuff that's pretty obvious. Well, imagine you're looking at a move list or an input list, and you see these inputs. You see a 664 or a forward backward, and you think, okay, that's 3 separate inputs. When in reality, one can think of it as, okay, I'm going to move forward, and then I go back to neutral, and then I move forward backward. And when I say forward backward, that is its own motion in and of itself, which, mind you, you're also thinking, okay, well, you are sort of bridging this mental gap, which is good. However, you're only decreasing the amount of mental inputs, I guess is the right word for it, by 1, because you are expediting only the transition from the second forward into the backward. And my response to that is, well, imagine how many times you're going to be doing that in the course of a single round, or a single stock in this case, let alone a single game or an entire set. You are essentially, in these situations, decreasing the load, or the executional load on your mental stack by a metric of roughly a third, give or take, depending on how executionally aware you may or may not have to be. Mind you, some players I know are just, they do this by heart. Other players definitely take execution more into mind in order to be more precise, and that's perfectly fine. But the generalization that I'm going to give is roughly 1/3. So you are decreasing your mental stack by over 30%, which can be the difference between blocking a mix-up or taking over half of your health in a game like Vampire Savior, which is definitely important. Mind you, that mental stack can also go in a million other places, and that is, it's sort of a resource that a lot of people fail to mention. It's not something that's visible. It's not something that is easily quantified, but it is definitely felt, especially at the lower levels where newer players might be thinking, okay, well, I want to start this game. I want to start thinking about this game at least semi-seriously. Maybe I want to beat that one friend who just so happens to be better at fighting games in general than me. How am I going to, up my game in a short amount of time? And this is definitely one of the best avenues to do that. Mind you, I'm not coming in here just to talk about the big fur ball, of course. I'm not going to switch over to anything else, but one other instance that this is most definitely apparent, although is probably going to be less seen in the match, is Akuma's Kara Demon using 6 MP in Third Strike. And what I mean by that is, well, you can also apply this to a regular Raging Demon, in that you're listed 5 inputs, one after the other, in order to execute a Raging Demon. The light punch, forward on the stick, light kick, heavy punch. So that's 5, right? I counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just as the combo counter counted 5 hits on that Sasquatch combo, or that Felicia combo. I don't remember exactly who got 5 hits on that combo a few seconds ago. But one thing that you might be able to think is, okay, well, you can sort of piano. Now I'm actually saying the word piano, because even though if you're using a stick, it doesn't feel like pianoing. It's the same sort of idea, because you can also imagine it on pad as forward, forward, backward, sort of tapping the D-pad with two fingers simultaneously, one after the other. But this example that I'm about to explain also applies on stick. So you can say, okay, well, I can piano the light kick and the heavy punch as one motion in and of itself. Okay, cool. So that's something you can do with one hand. Mind you, keep in mind that this is still on stick. You can also time it such that, or get used to the muscle memory of moving forward and then going for the light kick into heavy punch. So that is three whole inputs combined into one sort of mental input. And you can take it one step further if you are comfortable enough with it. You can go even further by saying, well, I can just press the second light punch and then go into forward light kick heavy punch as sort of one motion of itself, where you time it such that right in between the light punch and the light kick you are moving forward, and then you finish off with your heavy punch. So you can consider that Raging Demon input as moving forward, or rather, pardon me, sorry. Turns out my mental load at the moment isn't what I wish for it to be. So it would be light punch, and then you would do your big combined 4-button motion, or 4-input motion, I should say, which is the light punch forward, light kick, heavy punch. So that's all sort of one thing consolidated mentally. And now you have turned what is a 5-input move in many people's cases into a 2-input move through the power of pianoing. And you can also sort of apply this to the idea of kara canceling, because the best way to activate Raging Demon is to hide it behind other inputs, because it's going to be quite obvious if in neutral you just start spamming jab and your opponent's going to be like, yes, they are trying to demon. I should jump here. And, you're going to get red and look like a fool. But with 6 MP, you are grounded for a long staying time. Or rather, you're stuck in that animation for such a long period of time, and you can hide it in there. Mind you, it also has its own set of good properties where you are not only, going for an overhead, you're also you're trapping them in the corner. Maybe they didn't do anything on wake up. You're forcing them to block, because if they jump, they're going to get hit by your move. So it's sort of a multi-tool in that sense, in that in the right situations, not only does it keep your opponent still, but it also punishes them for potentially trying to not overreact, but overpredict by thinking low. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The whole point here that I want to return to in this particular instance is you can press 6 MP, but then you can also hide a light punch, or you can piano into a light punch. So you do 6 MP LP. And congratulations, you have now created another example of a singular mental input, and then you can combine that with the second half of the Raging Demon example, and you have suddenly turned, I want to say, so 6 MP would be considered 2 inputs, 7 inputs into 2 that you would think of, which is an incredible decrease on not just this is not in regards to mental stack in regards to gameplay decision, but rather mental stack in regards to executional decision, because you can simply just relegate this to muscle memory at that point if you achieve that consistently. Mind you, this also applies to every other Raging Demon type move in the game. I did not intend for pockets to go Dimitri here, but it sort of makes for a nice little accidental backdrop for that example. So those are the two big ones that I want to talk about, and those are the two primary examples of how you can use the idea of pianoing not just in regards to, oh, I'm going to Plink Dash. Well, no kidding, you're going to Plink Dash in a game like UMVC3. You are expected to use that as a fundamental movement option that is available to a majority of the cast, due to the fact that it's probably one of the first things you're going to see. It's probably one of the more blatant examples of this. And that's sort of the idea that I want to get across, is that it's not always obvious when you should be thinking about games or fighting games in this sort of sense. And so I think it's definitely something I encourage to think of outside the box when you are starting with fighting games for the first time, and to ask other people questions like, okay, is there a way to do this faster? Like, I'm starting out with VSAV. I really want to play a character like Sasquatch or Felicia or Wolf, and I notice that they can shorten their hops by holding backwards after a dash. This seems like a lot to me. How can I expedite this? Is there a way to expedite this? And it's good to sort of foster that intuition within oneself when they go into a fighting game for the first time, or when they go into fighting games in general for the first time, is to sort of come up with these ideas and explore and push what they, not just what the engine can do, but also what they think the engine can do. Because oftentimes it's these sort of mental blocks or mental ruts that you sort of get stuck in, like, oh, I'm just going to keep doing, I'm going to keep doing Bison Sweep. I'm going to play against my younger brother in my SNES copy of Street Fighter 2. I'm just going to keep spamming 2HK as Bison and hope he doesn't figure out. And the moment he starts playing Dulcim and sitting back and punishing you for trying to come in low, you're thinking, okay, well, now what? What am I supposed to do here? And it's good to sort of start thinking on how to freestyle, which is something that I surprisingly find a lot of people have trouble with in regards to traditional fighting games. Because, well, say for instance in a game like Smash Bros, you're more inclined to think about cool stuff. Mind you, that's definitely not the case in the more recent Smash Bros titles, especially Ultimate, which I'll probably have to make my own sort of explanation on why, even though I was an Ultimate spectator for years, I never really understood, or rather, not that I didn't understand, but rather, not that I didn't understand the game, but that I didn't understand what the big idea behind the lack of innovation in the Ultimate community was. That might be something else to tackle. But I do think that it's something great in regards to the fact that fighting game players sort of, they love to push their engines to the limits of what is possible, and they do this by having these sort of intuitive discoveries. Maybe you're playing a game for the first time and you're like, okay, well, this is an Arc Sys game. Maybe I can do the Guilty Gear input and maybe a super will come out. Just even little moments like those go a long way for making it easier for players to understand what they're getting into when they play a new fighting game for the first time. And that's sort of the bigger message that I wanted to get across with this. That'll be it for me from right now. So my next idea is probably going to be something in regards to not just doing things within the confines of input buffers, like, yeah, no kidding, you're going to input a forward, and then a back, and you're going to get this action. But rather, the idea of abusing buffers to do things that as you would never imagine the game engines would intend. So mainly that will be things like cancels, things like how in Third Strike you can go, in a majority of cases, actually in all the cases, if I'm not mistaken, say you're playing a Shoto and you go for a Dragon Punch. Cool, now you can do a quarter circle and whatever button your super's on, and you are activating a super. Why is that? Well, I I will hopefully explain that in either my next sort of essay, podcast, BKC style thing. I don't know, but that is something that has also been weighing on my mind as of late that I would also like to address. So anyways, hopefully you liked the the background footage of peak VSAV on Fightcade. Hopefully, if you're watching, this helps you out. If you're not watching, hopefully I didn't ramble on a bit too long, but I will be signing off here. Thank you, and take care. Bye. I don't know how to end videos, so I'm just going to end it like this.